Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Timbren rear suspension enhancement for the rear axle on a 2022 Toyota Tundra. Adding rear suspension enhancement to any truck is a great idea, especially if you plan on putting some payload in the bed or having trailers that you tow regularly. A lot of trucks today are designed with comfort in mind. They've become daily drivers for a lot of people, and that's totally fine. But when you start to tow, sometimes you're going to notice that void for comfort when it starts to sag, and that's not necessarily that it's going to overwork your truck, but if you want to supplement it and give it the best help that it can when it comes to supplementing your suspension and just making your truck feel a little bit tougher while it tows, this is a great option to do that. So I'm going to pull this in the shop. We're going to take a little bit closer look as to how it works and why, and then I'll show you how to install it. So let's take a look at that. And something with these Timbrens, or really any suspension enhancement, that you're going to notice right away is you don't really have the ability for the suspension to sag, even with that weight on there. And the reason being is, here's our factory jounce bumper. Quite a bit of a difference. For this to engage, it's going to have to travel quite a bit for it to bottom out on the axle. And by that point, you've already lost that much stroke of your shock. And that means you're going to be wearing your shocks out quicker than normal. And granted, that's kind of nature of hauling, heavy payload or a heavy trailer. But adding these jounce bumpers in place really makes a huge difference because it closes that gap. So that suspension is going to have quite a bit more room to have the stroke to still work, because this will hit the axle, bottoming out, not allowing that truck to sag. And this also has compression too, so it's going to absorb some of those big heavy bumps when everything's under load, and it's going to translate not only to less suspension wear on the rear, but also up front you're going to feel it in the steering wheel. And the reason being is, as your vehicle squats down with that weight, it pulls it up off the front, and that way you don't really have a whole lot of steering feel. So if you start to get that kind of light squirrely feel up front, that's because your truck is sagging. And the suspension's doing what it needs to do. This is just going to supplement that. So also with that loss of steering feel comes reduced braking. Sometimes your headlight heights are going to be up. And this is kind of a benefit to fix the sag, but also a little bit of sway control as well, because as you lean on turns, it's also going to bottom out, bringing that truck back to level, and it's going to keep it nice and planted. So some of the benefits that people have seen once putting these on are not just when they're hauling, but also as you go around turns. It's going to act not like a sway bar per se, but it is going to stop it from swaying as much. So it gives you a little bit more of a sportier feel just when normally driving, and just reduces that body sway and body roll overall. The first step to getting our Timbrens installed on our Tundra is going to be removing the factory jounce bumpers. And you'll see that they're just this rubber triangle here that's bolted up. And as we take this off, we're going to want to keep this hardware, because we're going to be utilizing that to bolt up our new bracket and our suspension enhancement. Now you'll see pretty quickly that we have two bolts going into the frame rail. There's also one up here, and we're going to get those all removed with a 12mm socket. I do recommend probably taking out the side one first. That way it's not going to be moving around with these loose. So we'll start here and get this removed. And something I'll point out too, while not completely necessary, if you want a little bit of extra room, you can remove your spare tire, and it's going to give you just a little bit more real estate to play around in. We're obviously on a lift, so it makes sense to do that, and also so you all can see it at home. But it is not necessary, but it might just make the job that much easier. So we'll take this top one out. Looks like that. We'll keep this in a nice spot. We'll get these ones removed. Now we can assemble our bracket assembly, and you'll see pretty quickly that this one has a sticker for left, so that's going to go on our driver's side. We'll grab our right side, and we'll grab our Timbren here, and there should be a washer already inside there. Just make sure that it's kind of in line, that way we can drop our hardware in place. So we're going to be using a 17mm socket, so here I'm able to just kind of feed this up, and it makes it easier to kind of get that to slide through. And then we'll just kind of hold this in place. We can then grab our bracket and we'll slide it through here. And then we also have a nice recess section here on our bracket. And that's where we're going to take our flat washer. And this is also going to get kind of tricky to feed on there. So if you need maybe a set of needle nose pliers or something to drop that on, that might be helpful. Unless you have small fingers, this is definitely an easier way to do that. So I still have my finger holding the bolt in place. And while we do that, I'm also going to grab the nylon lock nut, and I'll use my pliers to lightly thread it on. Make sure it's not cross-threading, should go on fairly easy. We'll just get a few threads started for now. And now that they're attached, I'll keep my 17 here. I'm going to grab another extension and a 17, and we'll get this snug down. And there's no torque setting associated with these, so being that it's a nylon lock nut, generally there isn't going to be one. So we're just going to get this tightened down enough to where it kind of bottoms out. No need to get too crazy here. Now we'll just take our whole assembly and put this in place. Now today we have a Tundra that's, I think it's stock suspension, but the tires are a little bit bigger. But really, if you do come into a situation where this isn't fitting, we do have quite a big gap here. And in fact, we're going to be using a spacer kit later to kind of fill that gap. But if you can't get this slid in place, you're going to want to take a floor jack and raise up on the hitch of the vehicle. And that's going to open up this window, allowing you to get that in place. And then you can just go ahead, take your factory hardware. And if you want, you can put a little bit of thread locker on here, just so it doesn't come loose long term. It's not stated in the instruction manual, but just kind of a helpful tip. And these are slotted, so as you're tightening it down, just try to get it as lined up to the strike plate or this flat portion on the axle as possible. And then we'll just go ahead, get these all snugged down. Now once you get those all tightened down, you've officially installed one side. All you have to do is repeat the same process on the other. And that was a look at installation of the Timbren rear suspension enhancement on a 2022 Toyota Tundra.